If you would kindly stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you and welcome. And Mr. Belair, would you kindly introduce our guest this evening?
Sure. Good evening, everybody. Ready or not, we're about to start. So next Monday we welcome back all of the staff, and on Tuesday our students arrive back to the Waterford Public Schools. I'd like to begin by introducing Bob Serpensky. Bob has been hired as our Director of Finance and Operations, so I think this is your first real official Board of Ed meeting, so welcome, Bob.
It is. Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Great.
Welcome.
Also like to welcome Pat Fedor, representing our administrative group. Martha and Linda are here tonight from the Federation, as well as Alan Walensky from the Board of Finance, also School Building Committee. I think that's it. So I think we're ready to begin.
Thank you. I just would like to, if I may, before I call for comments from the audience, just thank all of our administrators for being here this evening. I know school hasn't started yet, and you're still here, and the board really appreciates your presence. Thank you. With that, I would ask if there are any members of our guests this evening that would like to make a comment to the board. This is your opportunity. If you're here for a particular item on the agenda, you may also address the board at that time, just to clarify. Yes, I think that's why I said it.
I didn't quite, I'm not quite up to snuff on your procedure.
Right. We allow a 2-minute or 3-minute from guests, but if you want to remain the meeting, it's up to you.
That would be much more brief than that.
Okay.
Tom Pizarro is my name. Resident of Waterford for about 45, almost 50 years. I served on the Board of Ed back in 1981 for about 5 or 6 years, and I chaired it for a while. I'm here, I want to speak on the policy as far as naming certain aspects of our educational system for individuals who have excelled or achieved so much for the town and the kids in the town. I asked 30 years ago on the board that the policy be reviewed and changed at that time. It really kind of spun my wheels and was spinning our wheels on that one. Then too many other things came up at that time, school closing issues, whatever, and it was never really resurrected. We need a way in this town, we need a way to honor the people who have given so much to this town. You know, and of course, the name that comes to mind right off the bat is Grant Sweeney. But there are many, many people here. And it's just a very simple way to say thank you. We'll never forget what you did for the town and for the kids of the town. That's all I got to say. Thank you.
And thank you for your comments. Any other members that would like to make a comment at this time? Hearing none, we will move to a presentation of our latest CAT and CMT report, and I'll hold my comments. I think Mr. Howard, you'll begin, and Mr. Belair.
If I could just provide a quick introductory remark, but I neglected to welcome, is it Johanna? Johanna
Yes.
Summers, representing the New London Day. Thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you.
We received back, I think it was August?
Mid-August.
It was like almost the 16th.
Yeah.
So this is kind of fresh off the press, and it's a very quick turnaround and a very quick analysis, but the test results came in very late. Usually we receive them in the early part of July. And so we've had the opportunity as an administrative team to take a look at them and share the results back and forth the other day when we met. And Mr. Powers has put together an executive summary as well as a very detailed booklet with the results. And I think when Johanna and I spoke on the telephone, one of the things I said to her, my reaction is, in the quick analysis of it, the scores are very strong. There's some real strength. There's a trend. There's some areas that Mr. Powers will highlight are the highest of student achievement at various grade levels and various areas. And also keeping in mind that we're about to move into another testing era, leaving behind CMT and CAP and moving forward with Common Core. But we have an obligation to present to you the results of our students for 2013, grades 3 through 8, as well as grade 10. So, Mr. Powers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And so, echoing what Jerry just said, Waterford students continue to show a very solid level of achievement across the board. Our 10th grade students' performance this year was the highest, again, in reading and math. You might have said, well, we heard that last year, and well, they beat last year even. So the trend is moving in the right direction. And Waterford students in all grade levels really demonstrated the highest achievement in the area of reading. And so when we've talked about, you know, a district-wide focus of reading, we're really seeing some evidence of that. When we look at CAP's reading, I want to bring to your attention really four talking points. The first is that, again, you can see where we are in this. All of the scores are really at that goal level. So we've moved away from proficient. I'll mention proficient when we talk about students with disabilities, but other than that, the whole report is really at that goal level. And you can see Waterford, 74.1% of the students are at that goal level. We are much higher than the state and much higher than even our DERG. And as you recall, the DERG are the 24 towns in the state of Connecticut that have a similar socioeconomic education and status as Waterford. So they're of like towns. When we look at the growth over time, this is a tremendous statistic, really. So when we look back from 2007 to this year, the scores, now again, different population of students, I know, but the score average rose 22.7 percentage points. And if we compare that then to our DERG, again, similar towns, over that same time period, they rose 4.6% percentage points, and the state rose 3 percentage points. So, again, the conclusion that we're drawing is that we've really focused on reading tremendously, and we're growing at a much higher rate because of that. Also, please note that we're the second ranked in the DERG, and again, there are 24 towns. So we were, again, with the DERG, we're thinking about being really in that top third, and here we're really in the top of the top. For writing, where the scores dipped from last year, and again, different cohort of students, it's still the second highest performance since the CAP was administered. When we look at the state and the DERG, we again are performing at a higher rate. And again, if we look at the growth over time, Waterford rose 13 percentage points compared to the DERG of 9.3 percentage points and the state of 9.1, showing again that really in the area of language arts, we're doing some things right to really enhance our district. We're in the top half of the DERG this year for writing. We look at math. It's another one of our strongest scores, and the highest really that we've seen on the CAP test. Again, compared to the DERG and to the state, we're outperforming. When we look at the growth over time of 14 percentage points compared to 6.8 and 7.3, it also shows we're enhancing the system in the area of math at a higher rate than our like towns or the state itself. And again, we're in the top half of our DERG. Science, one of the strongest CAP scores. We've outperformed the state and the DERG. We're still in the top half of the DERG, but our focus really has been in the area of language arts and math for curriculum renewals, for coaching support, and so just know that on the horizon, this coming summer, would be a science renewal. Now we look at the CAP subgroup scores. Again, for the students with disabilities, we are using the benchmark of proficiency, but I have the numbers for goal, and where there's a little less goal, the same profile of where we are relative to the DERG in the state exists. So our students are performing at a higher average than the DERG in the state, and we're really either the first or the second in our DERG. Why you see only 12 and 15 towns is some towns don't have a large enough N population, a number of students to really count, and we need at least 20. Normally, if you look at last year's report, you'll say, well, we had free and reduced lunch statistics, and well, our numbers for the students who qualified for free and reduced lunch in 10th grade really didn't make it statistically significant to report out. And so that's why we do not have the data this year in CAPT. Moving to the Connecticut Mastery Test. Again, really just want to point out that now we can look at a cohort data instead of just groups of different students at the same level. And if we look at the students who were in grade 3 back in 2008 and compare that to the same group of students now in 2013 that just completed 8th grade, we really see a 30 percentage point gain. And when we look at how each grade level, grades 3 through 8, did compared to the DERG in the state, well, we're higher in each and every grade level for reading. So again, when we talk about having really a district-wide focus for literacy, we're seeing really some evidence that that has been a successful initiative. For writing, a similar profile. The cohort of students grew, and in many grades, in all grades, we were higher than the DERG in the state for writing. For math, we had a cohort of students that remained a little flat over time, and the students that performed higher than the DERG were in grades 3, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So grade 4, we were slightly lower than the DERG, but higher than the state. We implemented a new math program, and where we've had literacy coaches in all of our buildings, we are going to have, with the readjustment of the TAG program, a TAG and math coach now at every building. And so we would suspect that with the curriculum resources, with the alignment, the curriculum renewal, and with additional math support, we would anticipate continued movement in the area of math. For science, the science CMT is only administered grades 5 and 8. And so if we look at the same cohort of students, we saw a 9.5 percentage point rise. And when we look at the 8th grade performance, it's really in the top third of the DERG. And again, science would be undergoing a renewal district-wide this summer. Now, a slightly different way to kind of look, and on pages 6 and 7 are the capped graph, and pages 11 through 17 are each grade level of the CMTs in your report. And really, what you see here is that the number of students in that below basic, basic, and proficient, the students that are not quite where we want them to be, is really representative of only about 1/5 to 1/4 of the class profile. When we look at the students that are at goal in advance, we're really saying that, in the class of 20, maybe 5 kids need that extra help, that differentiated instruction to really get them to that goal level. But if we really focus on the lower tier of that bar, which are the students in advance, so the highest level of the CMT assessment, you really see some nice growth in almost each of the subjects. And that profile exists for the majority of grades, 3 through 8. So it's not only that we're saying goal is good enough, we're really trying to move kids even to that highest level, which the CMT call advanced. And that profile shows that we are moving kids to that higher level.
Across the board in every grade.
When we look at the Connecticut Mastery Test subgroups, the students with disabilities, cohort improvement, and you see 3 tables on pages 18 and 19 that represent this. I compressed it to one chart for the purposes of our presentation, but you see some sort of tremendous growth, 54.6% growth in reading, 40.8% in writing, 18.2% in math, when the kids compared from the kids in 3rd grade to 8th grade. And when we look and compare with respect to our DERG in the state, in 9 of the 15 areas that you see above, we've really surpassed both the state as well as the DERG. And as you recall, we were really focused not just a couple years ago in the area with students with disabilities, because we were not only below the DERG, but in many cases we were below the state. And so that profile has really changed. Grade 4, you'll notice that we don't have data, and that's because there wasn't enough students statistically to actually have results to show up for that grade. So that's good thing is we don't have many students with disabilities in that grade, and that's why there's no data. The other subgroup that we have in the town of Waterford are really your economically disadvantaged. So it's measured by free and reduced lunch. And if we compare the same cohort of students from 2008 till 2013, we do see some double-digit growth in each of the areas, reading, writing, and math. We do see that in 14 of the 18 areas, we outperform not only the state, but the DERG. However, and this is something that we've talked about at our administrative retreat, we are concerned when we see more than 20%. So I sort of circled the areas where there's a 25% gap between the students here with free lunch and the students that don't need that assistance. And so we're saying that the students that have some socioeconomic disadvantage, there's a gap that exists. And so, one of our look-fors at each school are to say, okay, let's break that down to the student population, and let's see if we can really provide some assistance to try to close that achievement gap. So what does all this mean? Well, as a district, we've really begun to make the shift to the Common Core, and I have to say that in the area of reading and math, these are very rigorous. To quote one of the readings, and we've had many readings over the summer as an administrative team, but one of the readings with something in common. Research shows that the level of text complexity in high school has actually declined over the years between 1963 and 1991. And so whenever we say we're going to the Common Core, what does that mean? It kind of means going back to the future, kind of going back to before we saw that decline. And what we're expecting of our students now are really to learn at much higher levels, to really understand complex text, to really make sense of math. And overall, we're doing very well. In the area of math, some Things are emphasized at different grade levels with the new Common Core, but as we continue to move forward, I think we're going to see some dramatic improvements. So, next steps. The administrators have analyzed their school results. We've given you kind of the 10,000-foot view with the district results, and then at each school level, they've done a similar analysis at their school level, which really gets down to the classroom and to the names of students and how we can help. We've unpacked that during the administrative retreat. They will unpack that with their faculty beginning next week, and we're going to really look at ways to close the achievement gap with our socioeconomic disadvantaged students. And teachers will kind of use this information to guide their instruction. So, in conclusion, Waterford students as a whole continue to perform very well on our state assessments. This is a reflection of the dedication of our teachers, our staff, and the administrators in the town of Waterford. And so with that, I'd be happy to address any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Powers. Before I make my comments, are there any questions for Mr. Powers from the board? Tim?
A couple of things. Number one, I'm a pretty visual person, and I was struck, particularly when I looked at the bar graphs of our current students in the last testing year. If you go to the grade 3 bar graphs and look at them in a progression, you actually see a very graphic illustration of the top or the bottom basic and below basic groups shrink. Now these are different cohorts of kids, but I thought it was particularly impressive that as we got to 8th and 10th grade, those sections of the bar graphs became very small percentages. And I think that that's a very graphic illustration of the longer these kids are in the system and the longer they're exposed to what we are doing, we are having greater and greater success with them. And that I would expect that in 3rd grade, where some of those are a little larger percentages, over time, and I think that some of the other data bears this out, that we are shrinking those. And we are really doing a very good job of looking at that group of kids and really emphasizing instruction and bringing them to proficient and beyond. So I thought that was, it was just really obvious to a visual guy like me that those became very insignificant slices of that bar graph, and I was impressed. The other comment is just that we seem to be doing such a nice job with the CMT and the CAP, and we've gotten such a nice handle on the data, and we're moving in the right direction, and now we're going to have to change it all up. And I just find it very frustrating in some respects, because we're going to start with an entirely new set of data, and I don't know how easily it is going to be to correlate the achievement that we've been able to achieve in the previous testing protocol and compare it to the new testing protocol. And we're liable to be at this for a number of years before we have another body of data. I mean, it's so effective when we can look at, over the course of years, a group that we had in 3rd grade and track them and see that progression. That's so valuable. And it's going to be very much more difficult for us to do that.
There won't be any comparison, so we'll just have to allow that to happen. It's going to be completely different.
We'll be building a new baseline. But you're right. Once you have the profile, it does show that we are closing the achievement gap in Waterford.
To a great degree.
It does show the dedication in each classroom, and it does show that when we need to give some learning interventions to students, that they are effective over time.
Anyway, I think they're great, and I'm impressed.
Tim, thank you for those comments, and I was going to echo something very similar as Mr. Powers pointed out in the 3rd grade in the math area. and with the new math curriculum and what we're teaching for, but not worried about it, because as you look at the growth over time, and that substantial growth, particularly in the last few years, has really skyrocketed from, if you see the amount of growth from 2008, but then in the last few years, and I want to just make it publicly comment that we really owe a great deal of credit to our administrators, our faculty, our teachers, everyone that's been really working so hard these last few years when all that was demanded by the state with all of the new teacher evaluation and all that's been put on it, to have these kind of test results and to see the amount of growth that's taking place. We all should be very proud. It's a team effort by everyone here this evening, and I just like to point that out. I was just very impressed all the way around. Particularly, also I have to just make the comment to look at our subgroup with the special ed. The amount of increase in that area is phenomenal. So it's just really, I think we need to be very pleased with these results. Jody, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I'm glad that you are going to address the group of free and reduced lunch students, because I'm concerned about them and their, and their scores. And they evidently need help. I was really impressed with our special ed group. That was fantastic. And then I was really impressed with your whole presentation. I'm a visual person too, in this, and it's a lot easier to understand the way that you had it set up. So thank you.
I mean, when we talk about the difference, too, in the we're talking some substantial points, and you look, in general, from how Waterford's performing in the DURA compared to the state. I mean, it's 30-something percentage points, which is quite substantial, and if you look from where we started, we were a little more synonymous with that group, and we've made such tremendous growth. So whatever you're doing, I would say that you're doing a good job, and keep up the good work. This is what it's all about, student achievement, and I think we're very pleased with this report and the style, so thank you very much. So no other comments?
Just one.
Okay, excuse me,
I just
Jeff.
think it's a good time for the board to actually just come right out and say, thank the staff for
Yes.
the tremendous job that they have done.
That's great.
For bringing these scores up, so.
It didn't happen by accident. It's been very intentional. So,
Thank you all.
you're right. Thanks.
Okay. That moves us right to our consent agenda. May I have a motion to accept the consent agenda? Jody? Second by Kevin. The consent agenda consists of the minutes from the June 27th, 2013 meeting, the July 25th, 2013 meeting, monthly expenditure reports for June and July, food service monthly reports for May and June of 2013. Any comments or corrections on the consent agenda? Hearing none, we can move to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? That motion carries. Takes us to our reading and review of correspondence. Mr. Belair?
I just have one item, and I'm sure you all have multiple copies of letters that you've been receiving in regards to the dance club, and I just want to report to you this evening that there is a resolution, and it's something that we've been working on for a great deal of time, and the dance club will begin at Clark Lane Middle School right up to the Thanksgiving break, meeting directly after school, and then following the Thanksgiving break, they will return to Waterford High School, and they will rehearse and practice in the newly renovated small gym. One of the reasons why they're not there at the start of the school year is because it will not be opened until late October. So very much like every other program during construction, there has been a time of displacement. And so I'm pleased to report, and working closely with the high school administration and Dave Sousa, that we've been able to look at some creative ways of utilizing the, what do we call it, the auxiliary gym?
Yeah.
The auxiliary gym. So that the dance program will be able to continue on campus. So I'm pleased to report that, and as we get the word out, maybe the cards and letters will slow down.
Jody?
I just would like to say something. I'd like to thank Jerry and Jay and Dave and Andre and Paula, and the parents and the students that came, to our meetings to support the dance club, and I'm so happy we found a place for them. But they have worked, our group has worked very hard trying to find a spot. I mean, they went through a lot of other spots that wouldn't work. So I'm glad that they found one.
I also would like to compliment our Mr. Belair and the administrator, Mr. Hauser, for working so diligently on this issue and finding a resolution. Saved me from reporting all these letters that we received. So thank you very much. Was that? Do you have any?
That's all I have.
You have no other? I have quite a bit of correspondence, but much of it is advertisement and things, so I'll leave in the back and I'll mention it for the board. But we did receive, because we really haven't had a board meeting since June, we had our retreat in July, so I'd like to read some thank you notes to the board. This one is from Lynn and Brian Lynch. Dear Kathleen and Board of Education members, thank you very much for the lovely Waterford clocks that were presented to each of us at the reception for retirees on June 14th. The event was a wonderful celebration commemorating our service to the fabulous families of Waterford. It has been our pleasure to impact all things education, and we will always cherish the memories of working alongside so many amazing educators. Our thanks too for the support you have provided so that the educational opportunities for the children of Waterford remain among the best. Keep the excellence in education alive. With warm regards, Lynn and Brian Lynch. And then I have a second. The board received a second thank you from Dr. Massioni, Nancy Massioni. Dear Kathleen and members of the Board of Education, I am writing to express my sincere gratitude for the lovely Waterford Crystal Clock and the wonderful retirement celebration on June 14th at Langley's. The timepiece will serve as a reminder of my years in the Waterford school system, a very special place for children that I was honored to be a part of for the past 2 decades. I am eternally grateful to the board for all of your support during my tenure in Waterford. Fondly, Nancy Massioni. So those were 2 nice thank you notes from our former administrators. We also received, all of us, a nice letter from Mr. Belair mentioning the convocation coming up on Monday, and I think I speak with you that we're all invited. Thank you, and thank you for the nice letter. Pullman and Comley attorneys, just the latest on school law alerts, I'll leave here. There's also the regular Labor Management Foundation sends out the shovel sentinel. I'll leave that in the back. Thank you note from CAVE on our membership. Also a reminder that if we are interested in pre-registering and people are interested in attending the CAVE conference, August 30th is a pre-registration to save, and I encourage particularly members that have not attended before. It's a good experience. Just a note, giving all of the info and the services that we have received from CAVE in the past year. Kevin probably can tell you. Then the CAVE Board Recognition Awards, I'll be speaking with our superintendent about that. There's criteria for that. Were you going to say anything? Did you want anything?
Well, the only thing I was going to mention is that
you can do the
we can take nominations for anyone who would like to serve on CAVE. Would be an interview process that we have to go through, but anyone who would be interested in serving for CAVE, the board can nominate someone. I'm not suggesting anyone.
Thank you.
If you're interested, we'll call you.
Right. Thank you. And so that's my correspondence, and I'll leave those advertisements and those pieces I mentioned in our folder over here for you to take a look at. Thank you. And that brings us to our committee and reports. Oh, no, excuse me. Sorry, I jumped over you.
I have a short report. I just want to let the board know in preparation for the upcoming school year. I will tell you it's been a very busy but yet a very productive summer. For the first time in a while, we've had an opportunity to be engaged in hiring. So we've really hired some wonderful new staff, and we'll have a chance to introduce them all at convocation on Monday. We had 44 teachers and 3 of our administrators this summer involved in curriculum renewal in the area of social studies, history, phys ed, and health. And that's been a very productive time and a very collaborative time. It's really a great example of what professional learning is all about. We had a very successful summer school over at Oswegatchie this summer for 5 weeks, and that worked very, very well. We rolled out our new vans this summer, and it was a great opportunity for us to really go through a trial and a test and understand what's working, what we needed to fine-tune, and so we started saving money on July 1st with transporting students to various summer assignments, so that worked very well. And I want to recognize Bob as well as his assistant Pam, because this was a new venture for us, and Bob walked in on July 1st and the vans hit the road on July 1st. So I think we've been very successful with those, so I really appreciate your oversight to all of that. Many of our administrators were involved in teacher administrative evaluation training throughout the summer. We hosted a reading writing workshop institute for our elementary staff, and we had 25 teachers along with Craig and I. We had a great time working alongside of them for a week and really expanding our understanding of some very effective practice in the areas of reading and writing. We just came off a 3-day retreat. I wish I could tell you that it was a cruise somewhere to the Bahamas, but we had a great 3 days as a team of administrators, really engaging ourselves in unpacking and understanding the Common Core. We had a chance to do a great deal of reading, looked at a number of video clips to see what the practice should look like related to the standards. We all were on the website for almost 2 hours taking the Smarter Balance test, getting a sense of what students would be engaged in grades 3 through 8 and 11. And it's something that all of our staff will experience during the first month of school. So a very, very productive 3 days and really planning out the upcoming school year. Our newly hired administrators were all here throughout the summer season. You're really veterans now, you know, after the summer work, but very, very productive. And I'd also say the high school construction project. So as you look across the street, you see that the former building has disappeared, and some great work has occurred, just not on the outside, but walking through, and it's been kind of exciting each week this summer. But getting into the new band room today, the new orchestra room, the fitness center. I actually bumped into Ann yesterday with a camera, and I would tell you that I think Tim Fioravanti yesterday experienced Christmas early. He was absolutely giddy. So those areas in the building are really looking great. And I think they're going to be a nice enhancement. And we still have some work to do, but you see the paving, sidewalks are going in. And I have to tell you, I love deadlines. It appears that's the only way we get some of the work done, right, Alan? Is there's a deadline. It's called the kids and staff are back on Monday. We need this done, and we need it done now. So very productive and really a lot of teamwork throughout the course of the summer to make the new school year happen.
Can I just ask you, in the front there, the part that still needs paving, when do we expect that?
There's a timeline right over the next couple of months. There'll be parking lots, and there'll be, we hope, seating occurring before October 15th. We realize that that's the last day of the season, so we ought not to wait till October 15th. We've reminded other folks about that. So,
great. Thank you.
Just a question about the evaluation plans that were submitted, updated and resubmitted to the state.
They have been approved.
We've got a baseline.
We have a baseline. Yeah, we're set to go. So the revisions that we needed to make were all approved.
Any other questions for the superintendent? Jody?
Jerry, how many new students did we get with the new registration?
Well, you know, that's the other thing I forgot to mention is we actually have done 2 formalized enrollments, and we're 8 students at the elementary level higher than we had projected in looking at the numbers this afternoon. So one wasn't as publicized as much as the other one, and they keep coming in, including some very interesting phone calls. I really would like my children to attend Waterford. However, I don't live in Waterford. How can I make that happen? So I gave them realtor numbers, and hopefully we have a little business.
Thank you, Jerry. Any other questions? Okay, hearing none, we can move to our committee and reports now. Anyone have a, I know Jody has one, and then I'll tell you.
Well, Jerry pretty much gave the school building committee report.
Yeah.
And with the Youth Service Bureau, we haven't had a meeting, but they're starting something new this year, which I think is going to really help middle school parents. They're having a I'll read you the flyer. Waterford Youth Services is happy to offer Loop for Clark Lane Middle School students. It's a great place, an after-school program to be in while parents are working. It's Monday through Friday, right after school until 5:30. It begins August 27th for the school year. A bus will deliver students to from Clark Lane Middle School to the Youth Service Bureau. It's $40 a week, and snack and homework help will be provided along with computer lab accessibility. So I think this is something that really was needed, and I'm so happy the Youth Service Bureau, will be able to do it. It'll help parents not have to worry so much about their kids being home alone in middle school, and I'll let you know how this program works. Camp Dash was a huge success this year. I think all of the 6 weeks, I think they were pretty well full.
Very full.
Yeah.
Record numbers, by the way.
Most importantly, the children, I think, had a great time, and they also learned a lot. And the counselors were wonderful. They're all Waterford students, and the 2 counselors are graduates of Waterford High School, so it was a nice family and community atmosphere. We still haven't heard if the Youth Service Bureau is going to receive that $100,000 grant yet, so we're waiting on pins and needles to see if that comes through. And we're going to start our meetings in September again. We'll have them every month.
Great.
And more reports to follow.
Thank you, Jody. Anyone else? Okay, just very quickly, the Waterford Education Foundation, naturally during the summer they take some time off, but they will have the next meeting, I believe, the first Wednesday in September. And they should have received the info on the conference that will be held in Cromwell by the Consortium of Education Foundation. And I'd just like to recognize their work and thank them for their support. That takes us right to, excuse me, 7.
But you did cover most of the stuff with TAFE. But I think we still have to, and I think we've always just made it the CAPE rep. But to appoint someone to vote on the resolutions and the officers. I don't know if I have to do that formally, or you're just going to call me and ask me if I'm going to do it.
Oh, for you?
I don't know if we've never really formally done it, but we have to have representatives.
We do, when we appointed you.
Okay.
Yeah.
We took a vote.
Okay. So you don't have to do that every
No. You're it until you tell us.
Say goodbye to replace But you may want to say that the CAPE conference will be held in November. I think it's the 15th, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
15th or 16th. So that's it. That takes us to our policy work. The first reading tonight is Series 7000, New Construction. The naming of new and existing schools, facilities, and fields. And if I may just start, before I turn it over to Mr. Tower, just would like to inform this board that you should have received in your packet a possible policy. And just for the community and for our guests this evening to know that this is the work the policy committee has had an intention to look at for quite some time. Not being driven by any particular cause. The policy committee has put it on in May, and this is actually looking to change a policy to really look to see if we can have a new policy. So this is the first reading tonight, and Mr. Powers, maybe you would like to add to that, if you'd like.
So Kathleen is correct. This was the last one on our ambitious list to do in the last school year, and we began that discussion really this week because we didn't have a policy meeting in July, subcommittee meeting. And so what you see proposed as per first reading is the policy. The regulations will follow in the next meeting. Is an opening up of our policy from a simple geographic location to having some criteria to possibly designate components of a school property, whether it be a field or a portion of a building, an area. in recognizing a person. And so part of the discussion at the policy meeting was around the language which is in front of you, and the other part was around what's the regulations that we need to develop to give the board ultimately the sole authority under this whole process, but then also giving the board some guidance as far as the criteria to look at when considering a change of a name.
Just for the board's attention, it was the consensus of the policy committee, at least what I was gathering, that the policy committee would like to maintain the long-standing tradition that we do not rename any schools for any particular individual, that we stay with the tradition that we have of naming the schools after a geographic location in town. However, the policy committee thought it was time to take a look at the policy to see if there wasn't room to discuss whether or not a component of a building, a facility, and then you'll see in the policy what is outlined as what we mean by facility or component, any room within the building. It was also stated in this policy that it's not really, this policy isn't meant, if the board approves it, to start to encourage this type of activity, but it's there to give us the latitude if a particular individual comes forward that has significant work and has done an exceptional contribution to the community. It would give the board that opportunity if it so chose. The board, again, has that final decision even after a committee is formed and may come forward to the board with a particular name. The board could then decide whether or not to approve that name. So they're built into this particular policy, I think, protection for the board also if at some point it was decided that a mistake had been made, the board has the opportunity to still vote with a 2/3 vote to rescind that name. So this is only the first reading tonight, so you have opportunity between now and our next meeting in September to continue to look at it and to bring forward, but certainly tonight we're opening up for discussion or any particular comments you may have. Whether you're... Jody?
I personally feel this policy is a long time coming, and I'm so glad we're going to relook at it. I hope it does get adopted, because we've had some wonderful people in Waterford that have done a lot for our children, and I think they should be recognized, and this is a nice way to do it.
Thank you. I'd also just like to credit Mr. Power. He sought out many other school districts with their policies in this area, and there are majority of school areas in the region that have policies on this particular matter. So we thank Mr. Power for bringing all that to the policy committee. We appreciate that. John?
Is the intent that the regulations will include the guidelines?
Yeah.
When we approve this next month, we'll have not only the policy change, but the understanding of what the guidelines would be, because they really don't make sense.
That's correct, John. So in the second to last paragraph, when it says the Board of Ed will establish guidelines, we will bring to you our proposal of the administrative regulations to really set the ground rules for that at the next meeting. We really spent a majority of time just crafting the policy, and this is not a cut and paste from one district. It's really a synthesis of many districts to craft the policy. And so we'll fold in the regulations at the September meeting, which will be your second reading of this policy.
I echo Joey's comment. It's long overdue. The discussions that we've had in the past years about this topic, in my opinion, is very disappointing. We did not make this happen much sooner. Like I said, it's long overdue. Jody. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Any other comments? I would also like to point out that we have many guidelines from other, so we have a good sense of how to put the guidelines together as well. Kevin?
Just one comment. As I was reading through it, when we talk about in the second paragraph where it says burden of the board reserves the right, however, to determine the need and the appropriateness. And it seems to me that the next paragraph really kind of explains the appropriateness of it, but how do we define
Need.
need? And that's, I don't know if it's an unnecessary word is what I'm getting at. If we just address the appropriateness, because how do we define need, and is that going to be a sticking point at some point? The policy itself, again, something we've been talking about for a long time, and it is needed. And I know I'm picking on just one little word, but I just don't know if it's something that's necessary.
I agree with you, Kevin, that the appropriateness would come in. The need, I think, was somewhat reflective of what are the guidelines. When you have your guidelines in place, if whatever they are, if those were met, then there would be the need. But I think appropriateness actually covers the need as well.
So
you could eliminate.
If the board would be willing, when we develop the administrative regs, if we see that the term need is really embedded in the regs, we might bring just a minor policy revision to the second reading.
Right.
I think the other thing that would help us if we're going to be working on the regulations, that there's a general consensus that this is a direction the board wants to move in before we engage in this work. So it might be helpful to get a sense of the board as to where you're leaning with this change in policy, because it's a philosophical change. And so this is a draft that would represent that, and then what we would do is work through what the regs would look like to support this policy. So I think it would be helpful to get a sense of the board where you are.
We don't need to take the official,
Just
just if you kind of nod. I think I'm hearing from everyone that they want to look
It'd be
at
worthwhile for us to look at this and try to come up with regulations.
No, I'm going to nod, I'm going to say yes.
I just want to, if we're going to engage in it, I want to make sure.
Right, because we'll put the regulations together.
We'll do it.
Have that ready. Okay. And you have, between now and the second reading, to continue to review.
And if you have any suggestions,
Make
send
them.
them our way.
Right. Thank you. That takes us to our second reading and possible action on our Series 5000, the use of private technological devices by students. This is our second reading. We had our first reading back in June, and pretty timely that we're here tonight because we will be beginning school. So we want to be sure that this policy is given its second reading tonight. And Mr. Powers, did you want to add anything to it? I know, if I may, just for one moment, recognize, if you don't mind my taking this liberty, recognize Mr. Hauser, our principal of our high school this evening, that I know he came to that policy meeting and he's had experience at his former district with our students bringing their own devices, so we're lucky to have had his input, and we're looking forward to seeing this pass, if this goes through tonight, so looking that it does, and it enhances. I think that some of the board, what we were concerned that we use the devices to enhance the educational process. That's, I think, the important key to it. So I'd like to thank you for your help with helping craft this policy. Mr. Powers?
So just to echo what Kathleen has said, it's really striking the balance between safety and educational enhancement. And we've had a policy which is more of a prohibition of sort of technological devices by students, and I think as it's become just more part of society, and with the smartphone and sort of mobile technology enhancements, it's really, I think, a benefit to the education. I want to also echo Kathleen's recognition of Mr. Hauser, because really it'll be really up to him. This primarily is a policy that would impact the high school to kind of have that balance between the educational use, which means we'll have to continue to provide some professional development for our teachers, to have ways to integrate it, and still protect the safety issues. And I think this policy matches both well for 2013.
I'm sure the superintendent will give us a report how it's all working out as we go through. The only small correction, and it's not really a correction, but on the second page under disciplinary action, as always, if you could just make a reference to the expulsion policy there, that would be helpful. That was it. Just as we always cross-reference.
If the board is willing to approve the policy with the intent that we'll reference the expulsion policy, we could move forward tonight.
Yeah. And do any members have any particular concerns? Tim?
Just one. Because we are treading into fairly virgin territory here with this, as far as the use of these devices in an educational setting, I think that it's going to be really imperative that we kind of keep an open mind as to how this evolves, because we are kind of treading into new waters here, and the technology evolves so rapidly that maintaining our ability to monitor it and stay on top of it becomes pretty important. So I think this is good, and I'm all for. I think the policy is well written. My only concerns are that this is liable to continue to evolve rather rapidly over the next few years, and you never know where this could go. And I just think that we're going to have to stay on top of this and continue to monitor it. And this is a policy that may wind up being revisited fairly regularly.
Annually.
In the near future. And just so long as we're all aware that because, this could dead end and we could wind up going in a different direction, or this could really continue to evolve to a point where, you would expect that every student walking in the door will have a tablet or a device of some kind, and all their textbooks will be downloaded on it, and it'll be part of our regular routine. We're not there yet, and whether or not that's where it goes, I think is still subject to seeing how it works out. So I just want everybody to be aware that this is something that we're liable to continue to have to revisit fairly frequently.
Thank you for those comments. Tim, John?
Right, yeah, that's what, this area I'm concerned about. On page 2, the search of privacy components technology. I'm concerned about the last sentence. And I wasn't until recent stories have been in the news about searches of cell phones by police during traffic stops, for example. And how far they can go in searching cell phone. If the intent was to determine whether the driver was texting, do they have right to go through entire cell phones to find whatever they find? I'm concerned about that last sentence. Is any such search shall be reasonably related to the objective of the search, and then there's more words there. Somehow I think that it should be just. That should be truncated to be any such search shall be limited to the objective of the search. For example, if a teacher believes that a student might be in classroom texting, that's the only thing that they should be allowed to search. If the teacher believes that they were doing some searches online that was unauthorized, inappropriate, that's only one thing they should be searching. They shouldn't be going in photographs or other data that's on the cell phone. But I think it should be very limited to, I think you're texting, so I'm going to go look at the text file and see what's been transpired over the period of time that I was concerned about. Maybe you can explain to me what the rest of that sentence really means.
Well,
I think it should be limited to what did I think you were doing, and I want to be able to search for that.
So I think that sentence captures it, but it basically it does say if any searches shall be reasonably related to the object and not excessively intrusive, and it's really saying excessively intrusive with respect to the age, the sex, and the nature of the infraction. I don't see any harm if you want to cut off the last part, but really it just says that, if there is an issue, it's really kind of limited to that issue. And I don't know, Andre, if you have any more insight on that or not.
If I may just interrupt for one moment, I believe, tell me if I'm mistaken, that we may have had this language is similar to the language that we had when we did a review for the canine search. So it would be the canine searches at the high school. So I think this is where this, and the reason we put the extra was actually a protection for the person by putting in the age and the sex to keep in mind. We wanted to be sure that the search was correct. It may be that the search in this case could be reworded, I'm not sure, but I think that was in keeping with the other search that we had. I think the intent of this is to be looking at only that infraction that might be occurring. I think you're right. The intent of it was that if the student was misusing one of the devices, that device, once it's in the schoolroom, is considered on school property and use in the educational formation, and so that piece, if they were not following the policy, they could be open to a search. I think that's what it's saying, but how you define, you don't want it to be intrusive, you want it to just be sure that they're not doing...
that you're looking perhaps for a more specific probable cause kind of a phrase.
I think the section should be truncated, shall be limited to the objectives of the search. What is the teacher think that the student is doing? Going and finding other, I'll say, inappropriate information being carried around by a student that's not related to what the infraction might have been at the time should be, I'll say, protected and should not be brought up to a sort of compound infraction.
John, if I could, I think sentence 2 actually explains sentence 1. And I think that's the intent, very much like you're explaining, that it really is trying to zero in on what is permitted and what isn't. And so sentence 2 really is in support of the first. That's how I read it.
I read it. And excuse me, Mr. Hauser, I didn't mean to cut you off. I think you were going to add to this.
Sentence 2, I think with the full length of it, it really does help students understand the criteria we would use to limit a search. However, in practical terms, if we stop the sentence right after shall be reasonably related to the objectives of the search, there's no substantive change in meaning. So, I would be perfectly comfortable with either. I think it's a little bit more reassuring to kids and parents to know that we take things such as age and gender into consideration in limiting the search. I think it's also worth knowing that an actual search of the contents of a cell phone is an extremely rare occurrence in school. It's simply not part of what happens very often.
I think I'm trying to, when I say truncate the sentence, I'm also trying to truncate anybody's aggressiveness in searching, privately on the board, not by an overzealous student.
Generally speaking, when we're searching anything having to do with student property, that is most likely going to be done by an administrator, not a teacher. We generally don't like having teachers searching student possessions of any sort. And I think in terms of limiting the scope and making us really think about and be aware of the limits of our authority in that regard, I think the more full language, I think, keys us into the things we do need to keep in mind.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
The other, right now, awareness.
This was a discussion, John, at
The other kind of gray area in this is that there's a limited expectation of privacy for students in buildings. I mean, we can go to their lockers anytime we want to and search them, and we can go into their bags, and And this is, these are different kinds of devices, but the kind of expectation has got to be similar. And I mean, even if you think about, students are advised that the board network administrators have the capacity to identify users and to monitor all privately owned technological devices where they are logged onto the network. The kids are doing stuff in school that is school-related, that is something that they are supposed to be using these devices for in school. I would imagine that they are logged onto the network, and that what they are doing on these devices we can monitor anyway.
Right.
So that anything above and beyond that usage is probably sort of a contraband usage anyway. We probably don't want them to be using them in that respect. So I don't have a problem with this, but I think that students have to be aware that if they're going to carry devices into the building and utilize them in the educational setting, that they are kind of exposing themselves to they're losing some expectation of this privacy, I think. I don't know.
Or another way of looking at it is they have a responsibility in the use of that device.
And so, you know, if something were to be discovered in a search that perhaps was not related, I don't know, the legalities of that are probably beyond our scope, but I think that students should be aware, and the policy should probably allow students to be aware, that their expectation of total privacy of their devices is somewhat suspect when they're using them in that setting.
That's right. A couple of places here.
Yeah. And I think it would be good for us to come back at the end of this school year and let you know how this went.
Right.
So I made a note of that. We'll do that.
Thank you. Thank you for the discussion. I hope we've been able to,
You need to take a motion.
yes, we do need to take a motion if we're going to allow this in the school this year because school's beginning. And I do feel that we have someone as our administrator that has familiarity with this policy, so I expect that it will run smoothly. David, yeah. Okay, yes, please.
The responsibility of the search of the device, that rests with the teacher, the administration. Who else can search a device?
Comes to the administration.
Typically, anytime we search any student possession, if we're worried that there's going to be evidence of a violation of school rules or the law, we want to have an administrator doing that search, not a classroom teacher. We want somebody with a little bit more training in that area and the administrative certification. So teachers won't be? Unless it was some complete exceptional type of circumstance where there might be concern about immediate risk of harm to a kid. A teacher would typically be going through a student's cell phone any more than they would be going through a student's phone.
Thank you for that.
So to kind of give a specific example, if it was an issue, the teacher might say, give me the device, and then they'd hand the device to the administrator, and the administrator would then investigate.
That's how that's how I feel like it should go.
Well, that is the process.
That's how we handle it.
Thank you for asking the question. Kevin, did you have another
I didn't have a
comment?
question. I just wanted to clarify in the motion, are we referencing the policy that
For expulsion?
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. And as the board had asked before, this will be clearly explained to our students when they come to school, so we asked that in the last meeting. That will be well done. With that, may I have a motion to accept the use of private technological devices by students and approving policy 5131.3.
So moved.
Jody?
Sorry.
Second by Dave. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll move to vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Is there anyone opposed? That motion carries unanimously. That takes us to our next item, which is discussion and possible action on an authorization for the new...
One more policy, right?
Oh, excuse me. I'm going too quickly. Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Biller. This is again a policy for second reading, restraint and seclusion. I believe this is being driven by the state
It is.
statute
This is
again.
legislative direction. We are modeling the law in this policy, and we have always followed
Yes.
it to this level. So really, our policy is catching up to our practice in this case.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Peller. And this is for all of our students, not just
Correct.
a particular group of students. Okay. Any comments from the board or questions about this policy? Okay, hearing none.
I make a motion that the Waterford Board of Education moves to approve policy 5141.6, restraint and seclusion as presented.
Thank you, Ann. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Second by Tim. Any more discussion? Hearing none, we'll move to vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That motion carries as well. That now takes us to the possible discussion and possible action on the authorization for the new Director of Finance and Operations to sign legal documents. Mr. Biller, would you like to...
Yeah, this is a legal requirement. With Bob assuming that role, the board needs to authorize him to do so. So it would take a motion to be recorded in the minutes.
This is nothing unusual. This
No.
is our practice.
Right.
Someone would like to make that motion for Mr. Strapensky?
Sure. I would move that the Waterford Board of Education approve and authorize Mr. Robert Sapinski, Director of Finance and Operations, to conduct business on behalf of the Waterford Public Schools and authorizes him as its agent to sign any related documents.
Thank you, Tim. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Second by Kevin. Any comments? Questions? Hearing none, we move to vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That motion carries. At this time, we will take a look at the Board of Education goals, and you have an additional draft that was put in front of you this evening with one other goal. As you know, just so everyone is aware, that the board held its retreat in July, and out of that retreat, the board, along with the administration, came to, in collaboration, to the goals for the 2013-14 year. You had these in your packet, except for the last one, which we'll explain. Mr. Belair, would you like to comment? I think, if I may, just say that we're very pleased that the board and the administration looked at the goals for the year, and we're very much in the same wavelength on what we need to do as a district. So we're very pleased. If you'd like to go over the goals, and then
As a result of our retreat, Kathleen and I sat down a week or so later and with the notes, and you see that also in the minutes for the special meetings. And I apologize, I left off the last one, and I realized after the packet went out that I had given the wrong draft forward, so it's at your seat this evening. But the first goal really connects to a goal that we had for the 12-13 year, and this really takes us to the next level. And what we wanted to do as a board was to identify the indicators of success to measure the effectiveness of our school system. The second related to the work that we're about to embark on, and that's really deepening the understanding of all of us, including the board along with the staff, with Common Core state standards, and to align the curriculum work that we have ahead of us directly to those standards. The third one is to modify our systems for emergency preparedness, and so this is all around security and safety. We've had a great deal of conversation around that. And we also wanted to include in that expanding the opportunities to connect with our regional partners around mental health services to students and families. And that was something that Jody, Kathleen, and I talked about at the Regional Board of Education meeting. And work that lies ahead for us is to set it as a goal. We want to continue to be timely with our revision and review of Board of Education policies. The fifth was to strengthen all aspects of our financial management through cost-effective accounting and budgeting, looking at energy management, as well as sound personnel practices and efficient support services. And the last one was for us to begin to think and look at the feasibility of providing students the opportunities to study personal finance and money management, as well as participate, and I left out the word international academic exchange program. So we had quite a bit of discussion around that, and this would be kind of a feasibility study over the upcoming school year. So these were the areas that members who were in attendance that night were addressing, and we did a little wordsmith, so we're wide open to any suggestions you have for any modifications and edits.
Thank you. I'd like to also just point out that we didn't want to give ourselves too many goals because we thought it would be to limit ourselves to those areas that we thought we could really accomplish well. But I'd just like the board to keep in mind that some of the goals that we've established last year and the year before, they're an ongoing, we continue to look, and it goes along with the piece on the district effectiveness. We'll continue to do the budget workshops. We'll continue to enhance communication with the community. We have a student on board. We talked at the retreat about enhancing that somewhat through our principal at the high school. And I'd like to also take the opportunity to compliment the administration and the board for working in such a team effort, because I think it's important when the board works with the administration, we're much more effective, and I think we can accomplish these goals. So I'd like to thank you for listening so well to the board and being so agreeable to look at these goals. I think we've covered, the Common Core piece is ongoing. We know that, so we want the teachers and administrators to know that you'll have the support of this Board of Education as you move forward with that. We understand that it's a task, so we want you to know that this is the support of this board. The piece, as you mentioned, with Learn, we were pleased that I think, if you don't mind my saying, I think at this Learn, this regional cooperation, they're going to be looking to Waterford a lot because we're the district that has seemed to find the ways to really regionalize and find the money, but they were interested in the mental health piece, so we were pleased about that. The board policy manual, while it's a review, those are areas that we have to do, but we also, in discussion at the retreat, said we will take a piece of that manual and try to update it. We didn't want to take the entire manual at naturally all the state statute pieces we do, naturally, but we're going to go through the manual. That's going to be part of our goal to get that updated. If there's any questions for those members, I tried to reach out to those that weren't present to give you the opportunity to comment. This is your opportunity for setting the goal for next year, or goals, plural. I'm just very pleased also that we're going to be looking at the feasibility of the finance and the international programs, and thank you very much for that. I think we should take action on this so that we're all on the same page. If you do not have to take action this evening, if you want to, if there's something that is not on this page that you think should be here, if you weren't at the retreat, we don't have to do it tonight, but if you're pleased with it and there aren't any gaps in these goals, then we could take formal action this evening. It's the consensus of the board. I'm all right, but I want to be sure everyone on the board has ample opportunity to weigh in. Okay, well, if John, did you?
I'll make the motion that the Board of Ed approve the goals as presented and amended.
Thank you. Second. Thank you, Jody. Any discussion from anyone? You happy? Okay, great. We can move to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much, and thank you to all the board members for the hard work, our administrator. At this time, we will need to take a motion to go into executive session for the purpose of discussion of the confidential student matter, and I would ask our superintendent to attend, and that's the only person. So, would someone like to make that motion? Thank you, Kevin. Second by Jody. All those in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Good evening. Thank you all.